welcome everyone to This Week in Svelte, episode 144, back after last week. Been at a couple of conferences, so I traveled a lot and could not be here last week. But I'm here now. So that's actually, I took a quick look, so there will probably be, there's just one release of Svelte, which is annoying, but there are a bunch of releases for the rest of the tools that we can talk about, so it will probably be a normal episode in the end. So let's jump right into it. We only have the changelog today, but I am already talking with someone. It was just I didn't know if I was able to be here, but there will be a showcase with also some fun discussion, probably next week. So let's jump right into it. We have just one release, which is ignore errors that occur in destroyed effect. So an effect that is being destroyed doesn't not count anymore inside. It's already been removed from the DOM and it's already been destroyed, so if there is an error, it's just ignored. There's also a type, just a type fix for state.snapshot, where if it is a big int, it's actually a big int. So that was for Svelte, but we have a bunch of release for SvelteKit actually, and there's also a lot of stuff, so I'm really excited. Again, I was not able to follow along with this because I was away. So let's actually see. Oh, because obviously we got some new pre-release. So there is a pre-release of SvelteKit 3. So there's now a SvelteKit 3 pre-release branch which has been published. You can install it with this. Obviously, there are a bunch of breaking changes. Specifically, TypeScript 6 is now the minimum required. Upgrade cookie v1. This was actually done before in SvelteKit 2, but then it was reverted because they introduced a breaking change. Require node 22 or newer. We are at node 26, so 22 it's still good. Remove preload strategy option. Module preload will always be used. Default to the cookie path option to slash. So you've seen in SvelteKit 2 that you had to always define the path. Now the default will be slash, which is what you mostly use. Remove SvelteKit node polyfills because we are using node 22, so most of these polyfills are not needed. Link header preload to preload using the link header. Require Svelte plugins with plugin Svelte version 7. Remove create entries from the builder object passed to the adapter function. So this is just for the adapters. Remove the deprecated CSRF check origin option in favor of trusted origin. So this is another breaking change that we did, which is basically trusted origin now account both for CSRF. CSRF is basically client-side request forgery, and check origin is just a boolean. So you either check it or not, while trusted origin define which origin you trust. So if you trust them, you don't have we don't check for client-side request forgery. And this means that this is basically deprecated because you can just do trusted origin with a star. Also, I just now realized for some reason my YouTube chat that I built broken, so I need to open this if I want to see you. So let me quickly pop this up so I can keep track of the chat too. Okay, so let's see. We have breaking. The delta property now only exists for pop state navigation event. Delta is how many pages you are going back or for, or it existed also in push state, but that shouldn't make sense, I think. Remove deprecated pragma header inversion polling for improved course support. And obviously it will also require 5.48.0, like Svelte 3 will require 5.48.0 or newer, which is where the async stuff has been released. So there's also a bunch of required VIT8, remove data SvelteKit option off in favor of false, resolve path using VitConf, and a bunch of fixes. So yeah, try it out. If you have any problem, please report. There's also reinstate app environment as analysis for app env in case dependencies imported. Oh, that's nice. Okay. Use SSE for query live. So this is interesting, and this is actually released in SvelteKit like 2. Like still SvelteKit 2. Before, query.live did not use SSE. So SSE stands for server sent event, and it's a nice way where you can connect to like a streaming, and you have to use a specific server sent event. Let me show you. You have to use a specific format, but basically like you, let me see if, yeah, basically you can add, this is doing in PHP for some reason, but like, so you have to add this header. Axel buffering is not needed really, but like the content type, which is text event, event stream, and the cache control, no cache, those are important. An endpoint that serve as an SSE endpoint will never need to be cached, always, obviously. And it has to return something as a text event stream. Once you do that, you can actually write to the streaming in basically, and you basically can do this. Like you can do event colon and the name of the event, then you can add a \n, and then you can add data colon space and then a stringified version of the data, and then you have to end with \n. So if you do all of this, like if you have an endpoint that does this, you can then, after a while, like when you can connect to it from the browser with this, like new event source, and like this is the link to the page basically. And if you do this, you basically get like this event source is an event target, so you can add an event listener, and you can say on message, and on message it will actually only work when you do, so as you can see, like you can do on message, and this will be invoked when you create something that does not have an event. So if you exclude this message, you can exclude it. If you exclude it, the event by default is message. Otherwise, if you want to have a specific event, like in this case ping, you can then listen for it by doing add event listener ping, like it's the name, and you actually get to choose the name. It's very nice. And this event will have event.data, which is a string, and it's basically what you are writing here. So this is a nice way. It's basically like the sister of a WebSocket, and actually you can pretty much use this over a WebSocket most of the time, I would say. Like a lot of people like default to WebSocket when there is interactivity. But this is a way, like this is not two-way communication. So like the browser cannot send information to the server this way, but you can just do it with a normal post request and it will work. The important bit is where the server can send that information back to the client. So now, before SvelteKit was not using SSE, I think I can't remember why it was not using SSE, but I know why now we are using SSE, and it's because a few like basically like we were just using a GET request and we were streaming JSON and like new line JSON, NL JSON or ND JSON, I can't remember. But basically like it's like each line was a JSON like blob. And the issue with that, like the thing that we faced is the fact that when there are a few reverse proxy, for example, like I think Nginx was one of these, that basically if it's not an SSC connection, it will not push unless you finish, like you close the stream, basically. So like the issue was that basically a few query.live were blocked completely because it never reached a certain threshold for which the reverse proxy was actually flushing the stream down. So it was just waiting for more data before flushing, which is not what we want. But they make an exception for SSE, and so now we are using SSE. Allow app environment with a warning when explicit environment variable is enabled. So once again, like if you are, I think we talked about it in the last episode, but in SvelteKit now there is this explicit environment variable experimental flag where you can actually use a standard library, validation library, to actually validate your environment variable. And it's a nicer way to define your, like what you expect from the environment variable. So like you still write them inside .env, but then you define this .env.ds inside your SvelteKit application, and you can validate, and most importantly, you can tell SvelteKit, okay, I expect this variable to always be defined, I expect this variable to be dynamic, to be public, so you don't have to use the public prefix anymore. They are all importable, so like it's very nice. If you didn't see it, watch last episode when we talked about it, and it's very, very nice. Actually, let's just go see it because it is nice. So SvelteKit, environment variables. Yeah, so basically you can opt in to explicit environment variables instead of importing variables from these modules. So instead of importing from $app/environment, you can import $app/env/private, $app/env/public. And you set it up like this, like you set it an experimental flag, and then you add a source env.ts or env.js, which export something like this. Export const variables, define environment variables, and then you basically like define like this is a private dynamic environment variable, and then you can import API key from $app/env/private. If you want it to be public, you can actually use public true, and then you can import it from but you can use it inside your HTML, but you can also import it from $app/env/public. And again, you can also use validation for this. So you can like more strictly validate that this Google Analytics ID, it's a regex that looks like this. And if a value is invalid, the app will actually fail at all. Also, if you want something to only be like available at runtime, like you don't care about it being available at build time, you can actually do this. Like you can use building, and most importantly, you can also define static true. And if you define static true, this is just like /environment/static, which means that basically this variable will actually be replaced by the value inside the build. So for example, like this is only like really important in dev. So like when you are debugging, you can do show debug overlay, and this will be replaced, which means that all the code around like that is guarded by this will actually be shaken away during the like this. So if you set this to false, during build time will actually be removed. So that's very nice. And the nice thing is that also you can document variable like this. So you can add a description, and when you hover over cache TTL second, the variable that you import in your app code, it will show the description, which is very, very nice. Avoid importing Vite while validating explicit environment variable. Adjust the release version of explicit environment variable. Ensure version is defined when importing from app env with explicit environment variables. There's also allow commands to receive file object, and avoid server component from being bundled in SSR if SSR is turned off for a root. So that's nice. Those are also ported to SvelteKit 3. So like, and this is also an interesting feature that was released, which is allow queries to refresh other queries. So I'm pretty sure, let me open it in a new tab. And let's open the actual PR. So basically right now inside another query, so inside another query, you can basically call refresh or set, and when you do that, we send down the other query data with the original query. So why this is important? It's because, like, let's say that you have a list of elements, right? And this list of elements has a bunch of other queries. Like, I don't know, let's say that you have a list of PRs, and then you have the details of the PR, right? So the point is, either you do this, like before, you basically had to have two separate queries, like get me the list, get me the single PR. The problem with that is that when you load the list and then you open one and you need to load the detail, you will need to fetch the details, right? Which is a bit of a waste in the sense that like you technically already have the data from the list. You might not need to reload the details, right? Maybe you don't have the full data, but the point is you can specify now that a specific query is actually refreshing another specific, more specific query. So like the list is refreshing the single query. And by doing this, what you get is that the client now already knows about that specific data, which means that when you open the page, the data is already there cached for you. So like, we don't need to reach for the server again. So like you open the page and that's it. Like you already see the data there because it has already been sent with the list queries. I'm not sure, like I'm pretty sure that this has some documentation. Let me see, runtime app, maybe no. I mean, it does feels weird that there's no docs. Let me see. Loading data, remote functions. Query arguments, the duplication. I don't think we updated the docs yet for this. So yeah, I cannot show you the docs for this, but that's nice. Like, that's the reason why this was included, and that's why, like, that's another tool that you can use to make your app a bit faster. The dupe remote data, so again, if you are returning this kind of things, like if you are using this kind of stuff, you can basically, like, if it's the same data, it's the duped. So like, it means that if it has the same like literally the same data. We're not sending the same data multiple times to the client. We are just sending once and then we reference that data. Skip client build if all routes have client-side routing disabled. So that's also very nice. Like if you have client-side routing disabled, this will mean that you will have no real JavaScript on the page. But in case you do, it will skip the client build. So like completely, it will not build at all, which is nice. Again, this is also ported to SvelteKit 3.0. Reset queries before navigating when invalidate all is set. So it's a patch change for SvelteKit 3.0. Again, SvelteKit 2, avoid importing the Vite development client code into build with a non-standard node env. Don't emit the unused bundle and style sheet files when using bundle strategy inline. So this was something that was a bit annoying, but overall didn't matter. But basically, if you are using bundle strategy inline, it will create one single HTML file with everything inside. Assets, JavaScript, CSS. It's a single HTML page with client-side routing and stuff like that. So like it's a single HTML page that you can just like build and then send to a friend, and they will open with double click and they will have a full SvelteKit application at their disposal. So that's very nice. But if you have used it, you will notice that the style sheet and the JavaScript was still generated. It was not used inside index.html, but it was still generated. So like that was a bit confusing, and now it's not anymore. Reset queries before navigating. Again, regression in loading asset for absolute path apps. We have this, 3 days ago, throw an error when pre-rendering a route plus server.js that returns a known HTML response. So this is basically like if you have a route plus server.js, it must return a known HTML, like it must return an HTML response because it's the root of the app. I'm not sure why that's the case, but there's a reason for that, I'm pretty sure. So like now at least it's erroring out in a nice way. The code base64 serialize fetch bodies before caching them for client-side replay. So if there is a fetch body and it was serialized in base64, okay, so it was cached as base64 to replay them in client side, and this was obviously a problem because then it was not deserialized. So like now we are decoding base64 before caching them. Correctly access explicit dynamic public environment variables from pre-rendered page and service worker. Yeah, so like this is again for explicit dynamic variable. It was not accessed correctly. Allow preload code to be called during initial page load. That's nice. Send cache control private no store on remote function response, so personalized query result can never be cached by shared cache. This sounds some CDN stuff, which is annoying. Preserve the HTTP status code and error body when a remote function request fail in transport. A 401, 403 from a handle hook instead of reporting generic 500. So basically the transport, if you remember, like this is a feature of SvelteKit where basically you can define a transport and this tells SvelteKit how to convert, how to serialize and deserialize complex stuff like a class from a load function or a remote query. And however, that could error out, right? And up until this moment, when this errored out, you would get a 500 as a response. But if you are returning a 401 or a 403 from a handle hook, for example, you want to actually get the same 401 or 403 instead of a generic 500, because like that has a meaning, right? So that's important. Avoid loading universal nodes during build analysis when the app uses a hash router. A hash router, once again, is like when you can set up SvelteKit so that instead of using like a normal routing system, it's using just the hashtag. Correctly serve client entry during development when using the PMPM global virtual store. That's some very specific fix. Normalize path separators when comparing config. Ensure building resolved correctly to allow avoiding build time explicit environment variables validation. So the thing that we saw before, like that you can use building inside environment variable, that's just after this fix. Prevent unhandled promise rejection when remote function failures are consumed via current error instead of await. Okay. So you like a remote function, you can await a remote function, but you can also access it with .current or .error. And this was throwing an unhandled promise rejection before, and now it is not anymore. Oh, there's a lot of stuff. So, pre-compressed, pre-rendered .md and .mdx files. So if those files are pre-rendered, those are also pre-compressed. So like, I don't know if you noticed, but when you build for a static stuff or even just pre-render, like when you generate the HTML, it also generates like some brothly files and some gzip files, and those are served instead of the HTML, even for static builds. Warn the user when they forget to make Boolean inputs optional in their form schema. So unfortunately, like because of how HTML works, if you are using a Boolean, you have to make it optional. Otherwise, like because that's how the form work. Like if you uncheck a checkbox, it will not be sent. So it has to be optional. It will not send false. Fix blur active element before component update during navigation so that blur focus out handler fires with old component data is still valid. That's nice. Ensure base is available for service worker during development. Use correct relative asset paths when rendering an error page for a missing data JSON request. Yeah, like relative asset paths. Preserve active for await consumer across query.live reconnects. So basically what happens is that like an SSC stream can disconnect, and usually the event source will try to automatically reconnect. Now the problem is that if you are doing a for await with a query.live, if it reconnects, it might like switch, like it was losing the consumer, like it was basically not using the same, like it changed, I guess, like I'm trying to, like it changed the consumer, like the point when you're doing for await with query.live, since we are dealing with all the connection and the reactivity, it was probably like signaling the fact that once it's disconnected, it was disconnected, and a reconnection was like counted as a new connection, which probably either invoked it triggered reactivity where it didn't, but most importantly probably it also lose track of where it was in the for await. Settle query.live reconnect promise on all exit path, preventing invalid at all from deadlocking when a live query is offline or interrupted. So basically before it was not settled, so like basically it was like the promise returned from query.live was settled when it was, I don't know, like uh, when it finished, but not when it errored. And so if it was erroring out, invalidate_all was waiting until the query.live was resolved to finish, and it did not. It never completed, and so invalidate_all was deadlocking, like it was blocked basically by a query.live that was never resolved. Preserve last value when a query.live stream completes without yielding on reconnect. So basically, before it was removing everything, or better, like when it was reconnecting, if you didn't yield anything, you lose the last. It was losing the last value, and now instead it is like this. Remove types node from generated tsconfig to avoid errors when types node is not installed. That's annoying, because this is something that you now have to specify on every tsconfig, and I hate it, by the way. Like, it doesn't, like, now it's not enough that you have types node installed to make node types available. You also have to specify types in your tsconfig. So it was nice that we were able to add it for you, but now obviously we can't, because it's not, like, if it's not installed, it will get an error. Prefer pages over endpoints when pre-rendering. So if there is a page and an endpoint and you're pre-rendering, it will favor the page, which makes sense. Restore snapshot after navigate callbacks. Snapshot again. Support WS and WSS and trusted type evals for CSP sources. So CSP, once again, is content security policy, which is something that I absolutely hate. It's basically a way to declare what your page is allowed to load, either in terms of script, instead of styles, in terms of images, even video, like stuff like that. So you can define, okay, I only want to load sources from this specific source, from this specific origin. I don't want inline script and stuff like that. So it's an initial measure of security to make your app more secure, basically. And it was not supporting, like, setting them through SvelteKit was not supporting WebSocket and WebSocket Secure. So now you can. Omit empty file input from remote form data. Fail early if a route with a plus page and a plus server is marked as pre-renderable. Wait a tick before resetting forms. So, yeah. Fix preflight schema apply correctly when chained before for. So preflight is a way to, like, quickly validate, like just sending the information for server validation, not the data, so that it's a quick response and you can check that the data is actually valid. Fix blank page in SPA mode when a root layout load throws. Pass all unknown options from the SvelteKit Vite plugin through Vite plugin Svelte. Alright, so that's it for SvelteKit. Let's see, we have a new release of adapter auto, which is a pre-release, I guess. Yeah, okay, so now we will see a lot of this, because like every adapter will have a breaking change to require SvelteKit 3 and update the dependencies. So that's probably why adapter Cloudflare. Yeah, we have this new release like this with a bunch of update dependencies. Adapter Netlify, again a pre-release. And I guess we are also doing some breaking change needed. So pre-release, migrate from roll-up to roll-down. Adapter static requires SvelteKit 3. Adapter Vercel requires that. Okay, no, that's a different pre-release, but I guess it will also require SvelteKit 3. There's also 2 new releases of enhanced image which require Node 22 or newer, require Vite 8 and Vite plugin Svelte 7. And this, by the way, is also the 1.0 pre-release. So we are getting close to a stable release of enhanced image. Yeah, exclude imports with question mark from the transformation. We have a new release of SvelteKit package, which is a pre-release and require Node 22 or newer. New release of SV utils. Add define and helper for version-aware environment variable access. So either Dorasan app env or legacy.env. So basically, like, this is a way for it's a helper when you're building your own I can talk. When you're building your own other, like the add-on, you can use define env so that we automatically figure out, based on the version, which one you need to add as an import. Add Svelte config helper, find, read, edit to locate and edit the Svelte config, whether it lives in svelteconfig.js or the SvelteKit call in Vite plugin. We have a new release of prettier plugin Svelte. Preserve nested rest path in each destructuring. Preserved white space inside text area. Don't drop script style content when the closing tag has white space. Oh, that's nice. So it was dropped before. Okay, we have 2 new release of SV. Bump templates to SvelteKit 262.0, move Svelte config to Vite plugin. Demo template uses the new const declaration tag. Support kit explicit environment variables in result and better out. Add new add-on to toggle experimental flag and opt-in into next version. Oh, that's nice. Update dependency. Restore SV create and SV add when neither install or no install is passed. And I think that's actually it. So yeah, there was not much today. I think it's a bit of a slower period, but yeah, like we are working on the SvelteKit 3 release, so and also Rich did the how is it called, the front-end master, which is now all in master.dev. It did a workshop, so yeah. I think that's it for today, and thank you for sticking with me, thank you for joining, and I'll see you guys next Friday. Have a nice day.